President Trump's meeting plenty of resistance to his new policies, especially on immigration and national security. With Republican allies controlling Congress, that means a resistance that depends heavily on court decisions and legal services. This was also the backdrop for a recent one-day strike called by the National Lawyers Guild. We'd like to welcome two of its local leaders, the executive director of the Massachusetts chapter, Urszula Masny-Latos, and the chapter's co-chair, also a founding partner at Community Law Office, K.T. Crossman. Thank you both very much for being with us.
Thank you.
I want to start with Urszula about here's this one day of strike, as it were. I mean, you're ringing an alarm. What should people be alarmed about?
Well, there is a lot to be alarmed about. Those of us who know a little history of Europe, for us, there are what we see right now since the not only the inauguration, but since the election, and definitely even before the election when Donald Trump started running, and how he built his platform on which he ran. For those of us who know what happened in Europe in the 30s, there were many signs that showed the path that Trump and his supporters were taking looks like a path to fascism. I don't like this term because it's very strong, but everything what I've seen shows that this is the path that Trump and his allies are taking. And they are leading us to some form of fascism. There are a few things that, in my opinion, show that we might be going toward fascism. The way how they talk about loyalty, and only people who are loyal to their platform, to their ideas, are around them. There is no place for any disagreement. Everyone has to follow party line, and whatever I call party line, not that they represent all Republicans, but whatever they establish as their party. So if you don't follow it, if you have any criticism, if you have any concerns, you are out. So the loyalty is very important to them. And loyalty was very important to Hitler when he started governing Germany in 1933. Second point, in my opinion, that is very essential for what they are doing is to demonize and almost illegitimize the press, not press, but media. And Germans had a term, Lügenpresse, it was lying press. And now, under Trump, we have a fake news a term. But their significance is the same. They are supposed to tell the audience, I mean the society, that they should not believe anything that is written, that it's said on TV. The only news that should be there is what comes from them. Hitler, in several of his books, not only one, he talked about how limited intelligence of masses is, and how forgetting people are. So it was very important for them to have few talking points and repeat them over and over again. And after a while, because they knew exactly how our minds work with our limitations, that after a while, those points become truth, and no one would question them. And that's what is happening right now. We have people from the Trump group appearing wherever they can, and they talk always this, no matter what questions come toward them, they always go back to their talking points. And it got to the point right now that people really believe what they say, even though other people, media, people come and show that all this, they're lies. But still, many people in the population, in the society, they believe, because they've heard it so many times, that they really believe that it's true. And another point that is very important is that, and we just saw, because 2 military people were appointed to a security council. And so right now we have more military people in the Security Council than we have ever had, because the council has usually like 2 military members, and the rest of them are civilians. But right now, with 2 new appointments, we will have 4 or 5 military people on the council. So it's twice what we usually have, and we are only into first month of the administration. So the fact that military people are taking over essential positions in the government should be very troubling.
Katie Crossman, what about some of the things that we've seen already that sometimes do involve some kind of legal? Think of all those lawyers going to airports around the country to help people get in, and some of them, people with green cards who would normally just come back in very easily.
Well, so I mean, what we saw with eventually what happened to that first executive order about immigration, the Muslim ban, they don't call it that, but that's pretty clearly what it was, is such a huge overreach on the part of the president. And this really concerning, the so-called judge comment, this like, well, maybe I'll listen to the judiciary, but only maybe if they say what I want to hear. That, sort of going off what Urszula was saying, is that's incredibly troubling, because the judiciary is meant to be a check. You can't just pick and choose when you listen to it. I think it's interesting and I think it's kind of cool that lawyers are now sort of on the front line. I don't think that lawyers have been always particularly helpful in social movements, or always particularly radical. I mean, the Guild certainly has a history of that, but it's very interesting, and I think we're going to have to keep doing that. The lawyers are going to have to keep being willing to put themselves on the line to support the communities, whoever the next community is that is targeted, immigrants, Muslims, LGBTQ folk, that those executive orders are coming if they're not already here.
We're talking with Urszula Masny-Latos and Katie Crossman of the National Lawyers Guild. Urszula, what about some of the other things that we might see here? For instance, this thing about electoral fraud that the president keeps bringing up over and over again. It gets debunked over and over again. But, I mean, couldn't that also eventually lead to some new restrictions or new ID requirements?
Absolutely. And in my opinion, that this is their plan, to question everything what we have established as elements of our democracy. And so this new administration questions all those elements, especially elements that made us a democratic society, and have to be part of any democratic society, like equal access to courts, equal access to justice, equal access to voting booths. I mean, like we have laws and we all have the same rights. We don't have any distinctions between people. But with those calls of recounting votes, even though he won, but he still wants to investigate what happened, just because he wants to question the whole system, because who knows, maybe something will happen in the future, who knows what. And if they right now confirm that the system as is works well, if something happens in the future, they would not be able to challenge it. They would not be able to question it. So right now, they are questioning everything what we put in place to make sure that our society is to some extent egalitarian and just. And by making those calls, who knows, they might make even more restrictions that we have already in some districts on those who are eligible to vote. Right now, there are places where people have to show their ID. And if you are poor and if you don't drive, you don't have any ID. So you are not able to vote. So all those restrictions that right now we have, or redrawing districts, so to make sure that only, one party wins in some districts, no matter what the population is. They're all actions that lead to sort of like make us powerless, and especially some of us, those who are poor, those who are minorities, those who live in certain places, and those who traditionally don't have access to some institutions.
Katie Crossman, as far as the controversy around immigration policy, one thing it's hard to deny is that the president's doing what he set out to do, and he has a lot of people backing him on that. But if you look at the scale that we seem to be heading into here, and the possibilities for errors and the need for lawyers to help people make sure the errors are corrected, what do you think is going to happen?
Well, I think we have to walk a tricky balance, right? We have to keep paying attention to what is coming out of the Oval Office, what is coming out of sort of Trump's little group of advisors, but not get so distracted by the outrageousness of it that we miss sort of the details of what is going on. So you said the sort of enlargement, they're hiring something like 15,000 new people for ICE, for Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Those are the people who round up immigrants and deport them back to the country. I think we have to be vigilant. We have to, while we are not normalizing the autocrat, we have to also be really paying attention to the details of how things are getting enforced. Not just say, well, we're not going to pay attention to anything he says because it's outrageous and ridiculous and we don't want to listen to it and we're sick of hearing his voice. We have to pay attention to that, but we also really have to pay attention to how these things are being enacted and enforced. Who's involved? Are the local police collaborating with the federal system? How is that happening? What are the things that we can do on the state and local level to ensure that we at least slow it down as much as we can?
Thank you both very much, Katie Crossman and Urszula Masny-Latos from the National Lawyers Guild.